All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. We have we're coming to you from beautiful Hershey, Pennsylvania at America's Transportation Experience, also known as the AACA Museum. And we have a very special journey to go on today with our special guest, Ray Wotkowski, an author. Ray has an education background. He's a great supporter of the museum, several of our committees here. And he is also known to the Keystone Packard Club. He writes one of their, is it a magazine or it's
Newsletter.
It's a newsletter called Panorama for Keystone Packard Group. And we're excited to go on this journey, especially since it ties to us in our Pennsylvania area about Fred Duesenberg and his final journey. So I'm going to pass this off to Mr. Ray, and I'm going to be in charge of people coming and going from this meeting. We're going to ask you to please direct your questions to the chat window. We will get to them all by the end. And a lot of information, and good history to show you here today. So I'm going to introduce Ray Wotkowski right now, and he's going to speak freely, and what he shows us on the screen, I'm going to show you on your screen as well. And this is going to be great. So take it away, Ray.
Good morning. The talk this morning is going to be structured like this. I'm going to go over a bit of the history of Duesenberg to familiarize yourself with Fred Duesenberg and brother Augie and the Duesenberg brand. Because if you don't have that foundation, it's hard to follow the story. Although there are so many stories within the story, well, we'll go from an introduction to who Fred was and some of his accomplishments, and then we get into the core of the story, what happened in the accident. The whole idea of the book was there were so many different variations of what occurred, that he was killed in the accident or rolled over and all. And I was able through some research, about 3 years of research, off and on, and able to really dig into finding the facts. And it's based on people who touched the car, owned the car, and drove the car. So that's my plug. So, and then it's the real story. The title of the book is Fred Duesenberg's Final Journey. And my little plug is that, you know, I think that I've been able to discover some really solid facts of what really happened. So we're gonna go from Fred's, Fred and Augie and the Duesenberg brand. We'll talk about the accident. I'll talk about what happened to the car. We can talk about how it touched. In the book, there's Shellsburg, Johnstown, and Johnstown, the legacy that he left in those three towns right in the area off of Route 30. So my first comment is that the Duesenberg car, Duesenberg is a German name, but it couldn't be more American than any other car that was built here. It is an American car, and you'll see at the end of the story. Actually, I'll tell you now. Someone asked, where is the car currently? It's in Germany. So, but it couldn't be more of an American car. A great history of the Duesenberg factory and how it came about and whatever. So I will talk about that. I'll talk about the highway a little bit. I can entertain any kind of stories. My talk is going to be pretty much on Fred and the accident and the car. However, there's a lot of information in the book that I'll be happy to share upon any kind of questions, and we'll go from there. So first slide is again the legacy. Okay, go ahead. That's Fred, designer of early race cars. Fred's claim to fame was he was able to develop this engine, the straight 8 engine, and he was able to get more horsepower out of it by just a couple little things, like they developed a supercharger, and they also had fluid brakes. So that helped the racing aspect of things. They dominated racing for 20 years. And you'll see in the other slides that they actually won the Indy 500 in 24, 25, and 27. In 1922, they were in second place. And actually one of my, David Ward, who edited my book, he's a retired Pitt Johnstown professor. He put a little blurb in there about in 1922, Duesenberg car didn't win it, but it was a car with a Duesenberg engine that won in 1922. So I had to give that a little plug to him. Oh, and I need to say this too. when I did my initial, article for the Classic Car Club, he did my editing for that, and he also did my editing for the book several times. And he said he knew I was a principal, a retired principal, and he said, "I'm gonna give you A+ on content." He said, "I'm gonna give you a B- on English." I'm thinking, that's pretty damn good. Great, I'll take that. I'm okay with that. Anyway, but Dave Ward is a historian, and he's just a great guy to spend that kind of time and dedicated to the history stuff. So that's Augie. Augie is Fred's younger brother. There's a family picture that's coming up that you'll see. There's a family of 7. There you go. And if you want to zoom in on the, well, this thing here is like a rocket. That's Fred and that's Augie and their widowed mother. I'm not sure which brother is Conrad on the right or the left there, but Conrad, he had a farm in Iowa, and that's where the mother came over with Fred and Augie. And actually Fred was 8 years old when he came over to the United States to work on the farm. There you go. Fred had this natural ability to look how things were working and fixing the things. He was gifted. Fred never had any formal education other than a correspondence course for drafting. So he did engineering things, and he wasn't an engineer. He was just a gifted, creative person, special person. They started, you get into hydraulic brakes. Okay. The supercharger was, and the fluid hydraulic brakes as there and there were 2 things that really helped them get to claim the fame in the Indy circles. The Mason company was the first company that he worked with in racing. And again, I know about half of the knowledge about Duesenberg, so I'm not an expert on Duesenberg. However, my superficial understanding is what I'm sharing today is for the story. And I'm sure if there's other things that people want to add, you can add at the end. But he was just an amazing, creative builder of engines in the racing industry. So good, which that was his dream to be a racer, and it certainly his accomplishments speak for themselves. They got into the domestic automobile business. They made 500 of them. They were called Model A's. And without money for development, as you'll see, with the Tucker display here at the museum, and without money for development and to support you, you just can't exist. And that's what happened. There were hundreds of car manufacturers back in those days. And without the money that Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler had, you just couldn't provide the amount of research and resources to keep up with our industrial revolution that was taking place. Okay, the story. My source for this story, to know that he was coming from Philadelphia, going to Philadelphia from Indianapolis for a Navy engine, was after his death, his wife, his widow, was applying for compensatory consideration. And so I had a copy of the legal pages that were there. Attorney Don Ray from Auburn, Indiana, shared that with me. He actually wrote an article on it. I have part of that in the book, so I won't talk about that in detail. But that was my source, because in the lawsuit, when they were looking for money for her, it specifically states that he was on the clock and he was doing Navy business. So he was going from Indianapolis. He took a train from Indianapolis to Philadelphia, and he made arrangements with the New York Duesenberg company. If the car that was up there belonged to Robert Ellen. Now, Robert Ellen, I think he was in the business of hosiery for women. And he was pretty well to do. You had to be pretty well to do to own a car in that depression, post-depression area, because at that time people were hungry. So they had the experimental supercharger on his car that Fred and Augie developed. And Fred was always the face of the Duesenberg brand. very driven guy. And so he made arrangements to take the train in and drive the car back to Indianapolis when he was done with the business with the Navy. That's the car that he drove. That was his car. That picture came from Fred Duesenberg's book, which has a whole bunch of information in there. Great book. The next slide you'll see, that's the supercharger. That mushroom shaped thing looks like that's the supercharger. So, and again, that came from, I believe, Rose's book as well. And there's a picture of it in there. So Fred Duesenberg, he introduced this supercharger and fluid brakes into racing, which made them, again, go into the corners faster, and take a break, and then they can take off better with the supercharger. Interesting switch. There's a tape of a gentleman later on, and his name will come up when the time happens. But this switch here was a variable brake switch. If you look at the top, it says on the top left, maximum, and then it goes to minimum. And then right where the arrow is pointing, back to the left there, it said dry, rain, snow, and ice. What that did was that controlled the amount of pressure that went to all the wheels, not just the back wheels or whatever. There was 4-wheel fluid brakes. And when I spoke with Bob Priggins, who owned the car for 35 years, he described that braking system, and I'll get into that later if you want me to. But that was on the car, and you can see the dashboard is that turn metal design. I have a 58 Studebaker Silverhawk that has a similar dashboard, which is cool. But later on, there's a little bit video we'll show, and it's described as, with the instrumentation that's on there, it looked like a cockpit from an airplane. He had many more dials and different things, and that's what kept those motors going. So go ahead. That's downstairs. That's one of the cement Lincoln Highway markers. And I was telling this gentleman earlier that there are still some of those that are next to the road. I know where 2 of them are. I didn't know that, but I know now. As of 2 weeks ago, I know where 2 of them are. So it's cool. I someday we'll have to look at maybe reproducing those somehow. But okay, so the story comes this way. He stayed at Watson's house. Now, Watson was the person that came up with the stabulator. It was a shock absorber. So add shock absorbers, add the supercharger and fluid brakes to racing, and it speaks for itself why they were dominant. So stayed over his house on July 1st. It was this happened over the 4th of July weekend. So holiday weekend, and it was a Saturday. It's like today, Saturday. And July 2nd, when he left Watson's place in the morning, headed towards Indiana, and he's driving it's a 1932 supercharged Murphy-built Duesenberg. To give you an idea of the car, it had a 142-inch wheelbase. So 142 inches on a car is like a 4-door truck with an 8-foot bed. Now, Duesenberg's that was a standard. They had larger ones that were 152 inch. Now, that'd be like looking at a hearse with the front wheels to the back wheel. So, and you might want to ask the question why. Well, Duesenberg never built the bodies. They were all custom. They just did the chassis, the motor, and before we get into this thing, I just want to give that a little bit more of information. Before the car would go to the bodybuilders, and there were 14 different bodybuilders, Rolston, Murphy, Judkins, I have them listed here if you want to see, I can get into afterwards. So the cars were driven with the chassis, the instrumentation, of course, the 4 wheels and the front fenders were on. At the Indy Speedway, it was driven for 500 miles to make sure that it met the standard of going over 109 mile an hour in second gear and over 120 in third gear. Again, we had no roads to drive them like that other than the Speedway, but it's no different than the Lamborghinis today. You know, the movie stars wanted to be near them, and that's pretty much what happened. And I'm getting a little ahead of the story, but I want to give you the background of the car. Because you ordered a car, and it might have taken you 6 months or 8 months till you got the car from the custom body places. So as he was coming through, this is Shellsburg, one of the 3 towns that he was in. Shellsburg is a little town, Route 96 crosses Route 30. It was a pretty common, pretty famous, crossroad back then, little hotels and different things. They had 3 gas stations I'm aware of. These still exist. The one on the left is the Colvin's Garage. And I can tell you a story afterwards about the Colvin's Garage because I know the guy who owns it now. The one on the right is the Ideal Garage. Of course, they did mail stuff, the bus and everything else. Back then, you know, Route 30 was the main way to the country, get across Pennsylvania for sure. Question comes up. Why didn't they take the turnpike? It didn't open until 1940. Okay, so then, okay. I go back 2 slides. One more right here. Okay. This is the store. This is the 3rd garage and gas station would have been in Shellsburg. I don't know which one he stopped at, but he stopped. I believe he stopped there. He calls home. Hey, I'll be home tonight. Talk to his wife Elsa. I'll be home. He's what, a couple hours into his trip already. There were 2 third-year college students from Chicago that hitchhiked to Delaware to go to a wedding. The Model T that they bought for $25 broke down, so they're coming back. They're hitchhiking. Again, 2 people hitchhiking are tough to pick up. Frank Peacock and Gordon Langley. They're on their way back. So Frank Peacock tells Gordon, go up the road a little bit and I'll try to hitchhike here and maybe we can get a ride. Well, he goes up to Fred when Fred stopped for gas and called home. And he has no idea who Fred is. And he asked for a ride. And he said, okay. So he's a passenger. They go up the road about a half mile. And he said, hey, that's my buddy, Gordon Langley. Can you put him in the rumble seat? And Fred said, okay. So Gordon's in the rumble seat. It's a damp day, so the top's up. And they're now leaving the Shellsburg area. Okay, this is just a map of the different mountains. You have the Allegheny Mountain, and then you have the Ligonier Mountain, which I refer to as the Laurel Mountain there. And then you have this little thing. It was called the Ship Hotel, the Grand View, which is about here. I don't know if they stopped there. They definitely went past there. I can tell you that, as you see there, it's right before the peak, 500 feet before the peak. And it was a place where you can view 7 counties and 3 states. And it was quite a place to stop. In my research, I never knew. There was a little gas station across the street from it, or across the road from it as well. So not only did people want to stay there to rest, I think their cars needed a rest there as well. But that's the mountains that he would have gone over. And everything was going well. And then they hit Jennerstown. Now Jennerstown, go ahead and switch. Well, that's Breezewood. This is just a picture I threw in there because I thought it was cool. An early sign of Breezewood off Route 30. Go ahead. And that's the Ship Hotel. And, you know, coincidentally, in May of that year was the grand opening of the ship part of the Grand View Hotel. So in my time, it was always called the Ship Hotel. Before that, it was called the Grand View. And actually, you can see the gas station on the other side there. If you're into postcards, I have a whole collection over here. You're welcome to look through in that book. I have it over here. 50 cents. I'll charge you just 50 cents for that. All right. So now they go through Jennerstown. And Jennerstown is where Route 30 and the Somerset Pike. I forget what the route is, but it's a very common crossroad where gas stations and people bought goods and different things. So it was very similar to the Shellsburg interchange there. And as you leave Jennerstown in 1932, the road would have swiggled up the mountain on the east side. There were 9 bends that you would go on. And then once you get over the summit, I don't know, I mean, the road currently exists as it did in 1932. But today, that east side looks like a straight shot. So the accident happened on the west side of the summit. And I say that and I emphasize that because if anybody's ever seen the sign that has been on the wrong side of the mountain, it actually happened on the other side of the mountain, 2 miles away. So this is the view that Fred would have had coming down the mountain and approaching this bend. Now, as we turn into the next slide, I want you to focus on that area there. Okay. Now, Kelly, who's not here today, she's the technology person. She photoshopped these cars in there for me to show one car passing the other. He would have started the pass right in there. And then Fred's car would have been a little bit more up the mountain, but that's what he would have seen from a distance as he came around the bend. Going to the next slide. This is the view looking up the mountain. And I say this area here is where the car ended up after it spun out. Never left the roadway. I'll put your attention to the ravine on this side and the mountain on this side. Okay, go to the next one. This is another one that Kelly did. This is the view looking up the mountain. Now, Fred would not have been in the view yet. In the accident, as the things happened, he would have still been around the bend because he was surprised when he came around the bend. When he hit that area there, he had a car coming straight at him. Next slide. This is me. I made this one. I cut out pieces with scissors or whatever. This is what, that's the Cadillac, by the way. That's the car that would be come right at Fred as he came around the bend. And there was nowhere to go. And it was kind of like that song, Clowns to the left of me, Jokers to the right, here I am stuck in the middle. That's what you had there. And so Fred, now this car with 142-inch wheelbase car, he put it into a clockwise spin. Go ahead. Next one, I think, but yeah. That's my kitchen countertop, by the way. How you like it? Okay. That's an Auburn, but it was a close model to what to show the suicide door and the rumble seat. So we had a passenger in the suicide. I mean, we had Fred here, passenger back here, and the top was up, and we had the other hitchhiker was in the passenger seat. And so Fred comes down with this car and he puts it into a clockwise spin. When he did that, the door opened up. He fell to the surface. He couldn't have been going real fast. He'd have been killed immediately. I don't know how fast he was going. Actually, I have an accident reconstruction person that's going to give me an analysis of it for me for addition to the book someday. So, so he fell to the ground, and of course, a 55-year-old man falls differently than a 20-year-old. So the rumble seat guy who fell out, he just got road crashed. The passenger, he's the one that got knocked out, not Fred. He hit his head on top of the bow of the roof that was up in place, and he was knocked out momentarily. The cars went about 200 feet, never left the roadway. Didn't roll over. If you follow any kind of history of this, it'll say that the car rolled over, that he was killed in the accident. He was injured, but he wasn't killed in the accident. He died 23 days later, and we'll get into that. So rumble seat and the suicide door. In the book, I talk about how the gangsters like that, they get their dead bodies out and things, but it wasn't really good for Fred. And of course, no seatbelts. Maybe that would help him. I don't know. The two college students were taken down to the Ligonier Hospital. This still exists. It was a bed and breakfast. It still exists there today as a restaurant. And they actually currently they offer all of the bourbons that are made in Pennsylvania, a bourbon tasting place. Not that I tasted there, but I understand it's there. This is the hospital, 1932. You can check out the cars in front. That's Johnstown Memorial Hospital. The main building still is there. They took Fred here because of more care, because Fred was, when he fell to the ground, he was complaining of chest pains. So the ambulance from the Hay Funeral Home, they transported him from the scene to the Johnstown Hospital. The doctor that was on call, they didn't have EMS back then, so they had a regional doctor. This was 4th of July weekend, so there was more traffic. Not a whole lot of cars out back then in the 30s. Of course, I think it was post Depression time, so people didn't have money to go on joyrides like we could do.
We got one person asked if you would mind describing how that accident happened again.
Okay. When Fred was coming down the mountain, The passing car was in his lane. It was head on. So Fred turned the car to the right and went into a clockwise spin. When it went to a clockwise spin, the suicide door opened up, Fred fell to the ground, the rumble seat passenger fell out to the surface, and the passenger stayed in the car. He bumped his head on the top of the roof that was in the up position. The car went another 200 feet before it came to rest in an area off to the left there. As you'll see, another photo will show exactly where it came to rest. The damage on the car was the blown out front left tire and a front left the steering component was bent.
Not bad.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we'll talk about the car later. Let's talk about Fred. This is about Fred. He's injured now. So Fred goes to the hospital, and back then they didn't have antibiotics. All they treated things with oxygen, basically. So they got an oxygen tent that came in from Pittsburgh because, as you see, July 2nd, minor fractures could be out in 3 or 4 days. His wife and son, Denny, but that is the proper spelling of their son, Denny, because that's her maiden name, Elsa Denny Duesenberg. And developed pneumonia on the 8th. They brought this oxygen tent in, and he was doing well. And they actually were cutting back the oxygen they were giving to him. But on the 25th, he had a relapse and he died at 7/25. He was 55 years old, 7 months and 20 days. Because on the next slide, you'll see I have the death certificate. So here it is. His injuries were as follows. He had a fractured scapula, but he had a dislocated shoulder. He had 2 mid-range ribs, 5 and 6, that were fractured, and in processes, which are those little bony things on your tailbone, that were fractured. Didn't seem like it was much. In my reading, in my early research, I said, man, those injuries weren't that bad. Well, he ended up dying of pneumonia. That's what's listed here in the middle, right there. You have that zoomed in.
Yeah, okay.
Right there, bronchopneumonia. And in my talk with Randy Ema, he told me that Fred had pneumonia 7 times prior to this. This was the 8th time.
No.
He had his ability to fight anything was diminished at this point in time. He played hard. He was a driven guy, and he ended up dying. They said of pneumonia. But one of my friends is an emergency room doctor, and he did a little bit of an analysis on how it would be treated today. And he said that clavicle injury was a high impact injury. He said, and those 2 mid-range ribs, that's tied in with that high impact injury. And he said there could have been a contusion to the lung, which may have added to his problems of internal bleeding. And it all kind of goes into that 23-day plan of being in the hospital longer and a relapse and whatever. They did not have CT scan back then. Today you would have a CT scan. The flat x-rays that they had would not show that. So that's just another perspective. More pages in my book coming. Okay. This is just a cool part of Route 30. It's a 7-mile stretch, it's called. This would have been between Shellsburg and Johnstown. And it was just my way of saying, you know, Fred's being called back to heaven. Let's get out. He's done his own thing here, and he's ready to move on. We're ready to take him back. So that's what that one is. I just kind of like that one. That's the sign that was on the wrong side of the mountain. It currently is missing because it was knocked over by a snowplow and stolen by someone in a black truck, 2 guys. That's all we know right now. So we're going to try to recreate that. I have Alteric and Vince Alteric are on a little committee with me to try to recreate that and put it closer to where the accident occurred.
This is Model J.
Yeah, well, it says supercharger price. It should be yesterday. Yeah, and I will tell you this, the information that they had for that and for that sign was based on one guy's article that they interviewed. And they didn't get into the specifics and talked to a lot of people. I met with the 2 of them because they were instrumental in putting this sign together. It took me about an hour to convince them that, hey, look at my stuff here. It didn't happen there. So on their way home, it all sunk in and said, yeah, okay, it happened on your side. So This is, now we'll get into what happened to the car. After the accident, the car was towed to a garage that was located on near the Sliding Rock Golf Course. And the Sliding Rock Golf Course was right outside of Johnstown. And there was this old school with a black garage that you can see from the pictures, we'll get to it. And the proprietor of the garage is named Ted Grant. Now check him out there. He's standing by the pumps, and yes, that's a cigarette by the gas pump. So Ted, I talked to Ted's son, Ted Jr., and I've talked to his daughter. They have no photos. Something happened within the family, and the photos were destroyed. So they have no photos of things. The only photo they would have of their dad that's connected to this Duesenberg thing is this photo. So Ted Grant hooks up his tow truck. Now the tow truck was very interesting. It was a converted Pierce Arrow. So could you imagine a Pierce Arrow pulling the Duesenberg? And it only went about 2 miles to the garage. When Ted got that back to the garage, he knew what it was. It was like us seeing a Lamborghini today, you know. So he put the spare tire on, straightened up the tie rod, and he was driving it around a little bit. Again, it's 4th of July weekend. So they're, you know, Indianapolis, they're going to send a transport in for it, but not to go out there the holiday. This is Saturday. So for Sunday and Monday, they had the car, and he drove it all around there. And I only know that because this next photo is going to be this is the son of the guy who owned the garage. His name is Eugene Walter. Eugene was 18 years old. Check out that outfit, man. I have to get an outfit like that. It's kind of cool with his knickers. He's dressed like that because that's the golf course, the Sliding Rock golf course that his grandfather built, or his dad built. So Ted Grant let him drive the car one day. He kept talking about it with his brothers, or with their three sons, excuse me. And he always talked about driving the Duesenberg. It was such a cool car and whatever. So what they ended up doing, but when he was 90 years old, they found out who owned the car. And it was owned by Bob Friggins from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, I've spoken to Bob Friggins a number of times. Coincidentally, Bob is either 89 or 90 years old right now. And I spoke to him 2 weeks ago. And he loves talking about the car. He owned it for 35 years. So that's the exact spot where the car ended up. And in the book and on the pictures, and I'll just pick this book up here real quick. They're going to show up on the screen.
It will zoom on in there.
That way.
There you go now. Go closer.
Okay, good.
Closer.
All right.
There it is.
All right.
That's the look. Flip it
All right.
around the other way.
Am I good?
Yep.
Okay, so as you can see, that's where the car ended up, where the arrow was on there, right around the bend, the arrow on top of Eugene's head there. So that's my eyewitness person that says this is where it happened, on this side of the mountain, that's where the car ended. He actually, again, the person who drove the car, touching, it was either, my whole story is based on people who touched, owned, or drove the car. So that's my source of that, of showing the exact spot where it came to rest. Right?
This will start automatically, so.
Okay. All right, and this,
It'll wait for me. So you go ahead.
okay, this is a video of Eugene Walter at age 89 with his sons, and it's about 5 minutes, and he talks about the experience of driving the car. He'll talk about the color of it. He's a little racy on the first thing he says, so pay attention to the first line, 'cause it's kind of cool.
For the sake of the,
Past 88, 89,
this, today is October the
next time,
6th.
next birthday I'll be 90.
Yeah, this is October 6, 2002, so you're 89 plus.
9 and 2 12.
So you actually drove the car that he was killed in.
Yep, and it had so much power back in those days. When you stepped on it, it pulled your underwear so tight on you that it made your eyes water.
It was, what was, do you remember the color of the car and the,
Kind of a maroon or deep, dark red,
Dark red,
I'd say maroon.
but,
Was it two-tone, you remember, or?
No, one tone. Two wire wheels set up on the side,
uh-huh.
and the exhaust system come out, pipes come out the side, and the dashboard was like an airplane. And on the left side of the dash, you could set it for rain, ice, sleet, snow.
No kidding.
So if you panically hit the brake, it reacts accordingly.
So actually it was an anti-skid brake back then, so to speak.
At that time, Chrysler and Duesenberg were the only two cars that had hydraulic brakes.
No kidding. It's incredible. Absolutely.
Four-wheel hydraulic brakes.
Okay, you can cut out
Brakes
this.
on all four wheels. A lot
About
of
10 minutes long. Okay, that's about 10 minutes long, unless you all want to listen to it some more. I would tell you this, that these are some of the things that he says in there that, that they're kind of interesting. He definitely said that they came with a transport and transported the car. My understanding prior to this video was that they actually drove the car back to Indianapolis, and that was wrong. You know, in any research you do, the first thing you learn is sometimes you're wrong and you need to correct it when it's time to correct it, you know? Kind of like being married and you say I'm sorry to your wife, you know, it's kind of like that stuff, yeah. So he also talked about, the emergency brake. It was a big handle. It wasn't something small. It was out in the middle. We would hold it with your right hand, and it was huge. It just stood out like that. There was one other aspect of the car that the other aspect that he'll talk about on that video, because it goes on, is that there were two cutouts. There were exhaust cutouts. They would make it go straight pipes. It would give it more ability to breathe with the supercharger, and it would go. And then he talks about how one day someone had it out, one of the days, and then they got it in the stones, and it was just like took off like a rocket. So, but that's the video. And the son that's holding the video camera, you know, he sounds like God. So I mean, I'm going to get this refined. I just thought it'd be kind of cool to see. Again, my research was based on people who touched, owned, and drove the car. So that's kind of cool. Okay. When we were looking for the location of the garage on the Sliding Rock Golf Course, right over here, you see the white building to the right was an old school. The garage was just that added dark spot in there. So that's where the garage was. Currently, that is number 5 of the golf course. And it's a small golf course, but on that side of the road, that's just number 5. Only one hole was there. This is another photo showing up in a corner there. We were going through, like, here's Waldo, trying to find out where the garage was because we didn't know. The next one you'll see, go ahead. This is kind of cool. This is another family photo. The King Edward sign there, you could see, but where the garage was, you have to look beyond there, right up in there, and you'll see a shell sign. That's where the garage was located. So as we were looking through these family photos, looking for the location of the garage, that was another cool piece. You can see the shell sign up there. And then the only thing that remains from that garage, next slide there, is the base, and that was the metal part that held that sign up. So I have permission to paint that and put something on there to show that, hey, this is where the garage was. Because currently, when you come on the existing road, you can take the old Route 30 and up on number 5 hole there, right offside the road. I have permission to do something there, so I am going to mark it. I think it has some history. Okay, now I want to talk about the road, because back then when he drove, there were 9 turns coming from Johnstown, and the NRA, which is the National Recovery Administration, nothing to do with rifles, and the Blue Eagle was their insignia, and FDR came up with this, and it was found to be unconstitutional in 1935, but yet the money from this was used to straighten up the road. So go next page. That's them blowing up the top of the mountain to straighten it up. And earlier in the talk, I had photos of the road looking into Johnstown and looking out as it's nice and straight now. Well, that's them blowing up the road. Next one is, oh no, that's the one. This is looking this is leaving Johnstown. So if you're in Johnstown and you see this straightaway, you can still take this road, and there's probably 6 or 7 turns that are still there. And that includes Pickens turn. Now, Pickens Bend was one of the sites they said, well, it happened there. It didn't happen there because it had been going uphill, not downhill, where that was located. And this is looking down into Johnstown from where there's rocks. I just showed you the previous slide. This is Old 30 right there. And the golf course is right off to the right, hole number 5. Most of the course is on the left. It's only a 9-hole course. Still in existence. Okay. This is cool. This is a license plate that came off of one of the dump trucks when they were blowing up the top of the mountain. See, 1934, the bottom corner there, the trucking industry, and you could see the eagle on the left side there. My friend, someone gave it to him in his restoration shop. I haven't been able to steal it off of him yet, but I'm working on it. Okay, this is Bob Briggan's car. When the car had its accident, the Duesenberg company bought it back off of Robert Allen and gave him credit. I don't know what he bought afterwards or whatever, but what they did was, it was burgundy, but they changed it to this yellow color. And I don't know what happened to the car for 35 years. Bob Friggins bought it in Seattle in 1972, I believe. And he brought the car back to its original condition. He has photos of when it came from the factory. Actually, he shared it with me. And I have photos of his car and the superchargers that he has on there. And there were a couple things that were modified. One thing, the car had skirted fenders. And then it had smaller headlights and a different grille. So when Duesenberg went under, I believe the guy's name is March or Mix or something like that, who bought all the parts. Bob Friggins knew him personally and was able to get a new old stock grille, the proper headlights, and he took the skirts off the front. The rest of the car really wasn't bothered much. So he was able to bring it back to its original condition. Again, that's the car with the top up. And there's a convertible top on there, with it down in one of those other photos too. But the car was yellow when it came out the second time. They had trouble selling this car because it was considered a death car. Even though Fred didn't die in the car, and the car was a minor accident, they had trouble selling it. So, this is the cool part of this, another cool part. There's so many things here, but Gordon Burek was the head designer for Duesenberg and Cord back in the day, and he lived actually in Duesenberg's house. I know that in my visit to the Aubrey Cord Duesenberg Museum that Gordon Burek never owned a Duesenberg he could afford it. And he was the head designer. So he was out at the Sun City, Arizona, which is a retirement area, and he gave a talk on his designing things, and he talked about Fred's accident. When he was done, this guy comes up to him, he says, it didn't happen that way. He said, what do you mean? It was Frank Peacock. It was one of the hitchhikers. So that was one of the 4 articles that I was given in my initial research that when Gordon Burek, in conjunction with Frank Peacock, he had the article that was in the Classic Car magazine and said how it really happened. So again, people that touched the car, drove the car, owned the car. The facts in there, you know, give me the foundation for my conclusions that I've shared with you all today. So, go ahead.
Was he the passenger or in the rumble seat?
He was a passenger. And of course, the Duesenberg was such a status symbol. All of the movie stars had it. They had a special SSJ, which meant short wheelbase. And I'll show that picture there.
Hold on 1 second, I gotta stop this. There you go.
You see that? And Clark Gable and Gary Cooper. Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, there was another star. They were given 2 of these for publicity to try out for a month. And in my book, I said, man, if those cars could talk, you know, the stories that they would have. So that's that car. And I guess I'm remiss if I don't talk about E.L. Cord right now, because E.L. Cord, and I really missed that in my notes here. E.L. Cord bought the Duesenberg company in 1926. And he put the money into it, and he wanted Fred Duesenberg, after the racing fame, to make the fastest, most luxurious car in America, and he did. So that E.L. Cord was the money behind it, and what he did was that he was able to come up with color schemes and different things to try to be the ultimate salesman. So he was the only reason why the luxury Duesenbergs came to be. Without E.L. Cord, Duesenberg would have been done. This is called the 20 grand. This car was on display at the Nethercutt Museum in California. It was one of the most expensive cars, not the most expensive, but it was one of the most expensive cars. And I have one. It's just a little small. This is a Franklin Mint model. So if you can get one of these for less than $100 on eBay, shop around, or if you're sneaky enough, you can steal mine. But the cars that they came out with because of E.L. Cord, they put the money into it, were just amazing cars. They made enough of them they were parts to make 500. I believe they made 480 some, and I believe 300 and some are still in existence. In Fred Rowe's book, in the back, it lists all of the chassis numbers and engine numbers and the owners. Really cool. And in Albert's book, which is the other one at the end of the talk here, those are two like really good research if you really want to get into the meat and potatoes of Duesenberg. But I'm a little goofy, so I wanted to walk the old part of Route 30 in the last half mile or mile from the accident site. So what I did was that was done a year ago. So you can see evidence of where the road went through. And as you go up the mountain, as I went up the mountain, Mother Nature keeps taking it back. So go ahead. Oops. As you see, there's still, remnants of the road. And then when you get to the top, go ahead to the top. And I don't understand that was kind of, either that was planted afterwards or whatever. That was ran parallel. The main road that was built, and when he took did the blasting, was off to the left of that. Then as you go through the next slide, the top of the mountain, and you will zoom in on that notice sign. That notice sign will say, closed to all vehicles, and those big rocks in the way keep you out of there too. But that's where it comes into the existing road, Route 30. So in 1932, there would have been 9 bends that would have taken you up to that point. And currently, it would have crossed the existing road 3 times. So but now it's just a straight shot. Go ahead. Next step, meeting with the Lincoln Highway Museum in Lake Trove to do a display. There's five of us that are the committee that are putting something together, and I'm overdue to give them our design. So we're going to be working on that, so that we're making progress with that. The historic sign, I told you we are working towards that. The book that happened over here. Go ahead, next bit. That's Bob Friggin told in my book. So I've talked to him about a half dozen times. Loves talking about the car. And as sharp as can be. He just gave me the explanation of that variable brake switch and the design of it. Bob was an engineer. Go ahead.
Ray, if you back up to that
Go ahead.
previous, if you notice on the picture in a previous slide, Duesenberg door has 4 hinges, which is their attention to design, because back then you'd open the door and over time, other cars only had 2 or maybe 3, but those doors would not sag at all.
So the extra hinges we got for over engineering and pretty much that's what Fred did. Fred really planned that whole brake system. It was over engineered. It had, I can tell you this little thing. If you lost one brake cylinder because of a leak, there was a valve you could turn that one wheel off and still have 3 brakes to come home. So he thought, and then he had some self bleeders too. They were like vented things that Bob described to me. Pretty cool. And Fred was just amazing. Again, no formal education other than a correspondence course on drafting.
placement for it too.
So those are the Albert's book, it's available. Really worth getting. Go ahead.
Where do you get a book like that?
You just go on, if you just Google Duesenberg and Albert, it'll come up. Elbrus or something, and it'll be on eBay and different other places. I just bought this book for like, this here, that I gave mine to my friend for like, it was like about $40, which was cheap, but you could pay 100 or multiple hundreds for that book. They have a hardcover book that's more expensive, but I would suggest getting this for like less than $100. And that Rose book cost me $80, so that's more expensive. That's this one right here. But if you're into it, want to get into it, the racing part and everything, and the engine and the detail, it's just amazing what's in there. And this thing, the one that was on the right there, was really neat. There was a real thin pamphlet, and it had the cars lined up. I have a picture of it in the book. Cars lined up at Indy when they were road testing them before they went to the custom builders. The 500 mile, they had about 8 or 10 of them lined up there with just a driver, open air, with just a chassis that they drove around. I can't imagine going 100 mile an hour on one of those things. Yeah.
We're gonna take a few questions unless you want to continue about your, reference and publication books.
I have one more piece before I'll take questions. And the wooden raceways, they had them, this one was in Tipton, which is outside of Altoona. Is that on yet?
Yep, I actually am.
Yeah. All right, if I get you in the face, I apologize. And this is a program from 1924, and in the center of this program are two Duesenbergs. And on this page are two Duesenbergs. And if you look at it carefully, the one guy driving the lead car has a necktie on. He had to have been some rich dude that they let drive the car around the wooden speedway. So Duesenberg they were famous on the wooden raceway circuit as well as at Indy. There in Pennsylvania, there was a very famous one in Altoona and Uniontown, but there were several other ones that they built. And this is before they had the technology of having cement on such an angle. Extremely dangerous. A lot of people died. Okay, questions?
How did that brake system work? A variable.
According to Bob Friggins, all it did was reduce the pressure. It was not a limiting, for the back and the front as we have in our cars today. It was a low speed thing that Fred thought about for those different conditions, because you would not be going fast in ice, snow, or rain. And when it was in its dry condition, the switch would have been on maximum. But it just controlled the pressure to all four wheels.
We have user Greg asking, how much of a part did Fred Duesenberg accident, how much of it was a factor in changing or rebuilding the turnpike?
I'm not
like old Route 30.
Yeah.
More modern Route 30, which is still old. But
I've actually studied the turnpike, because the turnpike had 7 tunnels at one time. It has 4 now. They eliminated 3 of them. And you actually could go on a 13 mile from Breezewood. If you go east from Breezewood, there's a 13 mile abandoned turnpike that you can actually access with a bicycle. It's kind of cool. And you can go through 2 tunnels. I don't know. All I know is I'm not sure how the development of the turnpike came. I know the turnpike historically was the first national road to come across. And I do know, again, that it opened in 1940. I know that in 1940, there were no speed limits on the turnpike, so they can go like mad. There was a gentleman who had motels and stuff, and they were set up when the cars started to break down. And that's how some of the motels tend to be and that other stuff. So no speed limit. I don't know the history of when it, or the discussion of how it was proposed.
okay. So Peter Zabritsky also asked, did the Lincoln Highway bypass Old Route 30 during 32 renovations? Question mark.
Yes, it was a 44 mile detour. Could you imagine? Well,
Wow.
I will tell you this, I was headed from Jennerstown, I was headed towards Latrobe, headed west on Route 30, and a tree came across. So I had to do a detour, and I just stopped at one of the local people, as I was headed in towards Johnstown on Somerset Pike, and I went up over the mountain and was able to get around there and end up in Laughlin town. Don't ask me how I got there. When I got there, I said, oh, it's awesome, I'm here. So a 44-mile detour was quite a detour. And I forget how long it took them to build it. It's in the research here somewhere.
So, someone else, well, same person, Peter asked, and I guess I'll ask as well, like along Route 30, which is the Lincoln Highway, you know, what area or parts of this was hiking trail?
Well, there's a hiking trail that's right at the top of the summit.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a parking area there. I know that. I've never hiked that. But I know people that have done that. There's a hiking trail is right at the summit of the Laurel Mountain there, which Fred would have gone over right before the accident.
Okay. Someone actually posted a link in the chat window that might be interesting, about the alignment of the original Lincoln Highway, Route 30, and I guess the current one. So, if anybody can see that chat window or open the chat link, there is a link to that Lincoln Highway information there.
I could tell you this, from Jennerstown, actually from Shellsburg, there's a road that goes through someone's farm there, the original road. They changed Route 30 so many times going across country because of just the development of our country back then. But from Jennerstown to the right, you can drive one, and I would suggest doing it, it's cool. You drive on that about 6 turns of it before it comes back onto the highway right above the Sliding Rock Golf Course. But then you go down into Ligonier, and you also could go up to the right, and it takes you straight in through town eventually. But it's a cool old road. It wasn't very wide. The advertisement for making the road improvement, it was 10 feet wide with 8 foot barriers on each side, or not barriers, what do they call them? The
Berm.
berms, 8 foot berms on. So it was a huge road compared to probably an 8 foot one that 2 cars would have passed, or 9 foot.
And Dr. Zubritsky also, he seems like a real Route 30 Lincoln Highway expert. He said the turnpike was used heavily for transporting military vehicles.
Absolutely. And Route 30 was actually, I just did an article on the Goodyear rubber. They were driving in on with a Packard truck and transporting the tires from the Goodyear plant on Route 30 to the ships for World War II, World War I, excuse me.
Is all of Lincoln Highway Route 30 or vice versa, or are pieces of them separate? As you know of.
All right, the road as I know it is all Lincoln Highway. All the other little segments, you have the original one versus the existing one. And that has changed significantly over years. So, and again, it's coast to coast. And I'll give you this little bit of information. Henry Joy, who was the CEO for Packard, was one of the really, he was a money man. He was able to get financiers together, and he was a big supporter of development of a Lincoln Highway. And why? If you're going to be building these Packards, you need roads to drive them on. So certainly, and without, I would say this, without Henry Joy, the Packard company would have never lasted. Just like Duesenberg would have never lasted without E.L. Cord. Look it up, it's cool.
Didn't Joy trained up with Henry Ford to do that?
There were several of them. I'm not sure if Henry Ford was in that, but I do know that there were several big money guys that he was able to do. And Henry Joy wasn't perfect either. He was a supporter of the abolition for drinking, for alcohol, you know, what was it called back then?
Prohibition.
Prohibition. He was a supporter of that, said it wasn't a good decision. Other questions?
How about in-house? Do we have any
Anything here?
questions in-house?
Yes.
I'll say just I found the medical side of it fascinating too. Are there preserved medical records of his care?
Haven't found them yet. No, haven't found them, and I haven't found the state police report of the accident. The state police were there. I called in Hershey here, which they have the library and there's their curator, and they have no record of it. But the state policeman was on scene. That was the first time that the hitchhikers knew that who Fred Duesenberg was, because they did not know that he was the creator of that car. But no, those records aren't available. His room number or anything like that. I'm still looking. You don't know.
It seems a little bit too with fractured ribs or even his clavicle. may have even punctured his lungs, spontaneous pneumothorax, or
Sure.
even pulmonary embolism, depending the type of care they give today versus back then.
Oh,
Could even be, just from not being ambulatory.
Sure.
That would be fascinating too.
Yeah, and the following, John Rohe, Dr. Rohe from up in, New York, he's an emergency room doctor. He looked at that, death certificate and he gave me that perspective. I said, okay, John, said, write it up. So he did. And actually I have it here. I can share it with you before you leave. Okay. Any other questions? How did I get interested in this writing stuff? I always like to write. My background is industrial arts. I was an industrial arts teacher. But when I was the principal for 26 years, I had to write articles for our newsletter, our school newspaper, new school stuff. And the teachers weren't the most, they weren't the most energetic person about writing articles in case they made a mistake grammatically or something like that. I don't, anytime I did any writing with the handbook or whatever I did, I always took up to the English department, say, hey, take a look at this. I'm not an English major. That's okay. When you're writing, I own the story. I own the ideas. That's so much more important than English. It's like getting a B- in English. To me, I'm okay with that. And he joked about that, but I always throw that in there because, even the editor for the Classic Car Club, he said, I hope I don't say anything make you, mad or anything. I said, no, it's your magazine. Just don't change the story. And when the story is done, it's my story. So, okay. So, the writing process is kind of cool. We talk about that. And it's, you write the story. This is what I did. Wrote the story. David Ward edited. Actually, attorney Don Ray edited as well for me. And so I had an edited version. Then you go to the book designer, Rachel Zook from Mechanicsburg. She put the pages together. Not a car person. Every flat place in my kitchen had stuff, because I printed this thing out, and I'm a visual person, so I had all that stuff out a couple of times. There were 3 different drafts. And then she was awesome. So we put this thing together, and there's still some things I want to change, but it was pretty good. The result, I was really satisfied. And then the book itself, it might feel like a yearbook because it was printed by Johnstown, who does school yearbooks. So, and the pages and the quality of it, it just, my friend, Fred Reaping from Somerset was our yearbook, representative, and I went through him because the company was one that Rachel worked with. So I said, no, I'm very good with Fred now, because he's my buddy.
Ray, where can people get a copy of your book?
Okay,
Bookstore.
if you're here, you can get them downstairs. If you want to get them from me, I have about 600 at home. So they can, my email is old cars. Oh, well, you want to print it on there or whatever?
I'll see what I can do.
Okay,
here.
my email is oldcars, OLDCARZ as in zebra @comcast.net. And my phone number is 814-244-0496. Call me. The books are for $29.99 down here because there's a percentage that goes to the museum. If you get them from me, they're going to be cheaper. It costs about $5 to put them in the mail today. Costs about $1 or $1.50 for an envelope, and it comes out to $5 or $6. So the cost is $25 plus postage. So if you send me a $30 check, you'll get a book. And again, I have my address, which is, if you want to put that in there.
No.
Okay, call me, or get them.
Let's put the phone number in again. Someone's asking for that. If you want to put that in there, I will.
That's right, go put it in.
Sure.
It's 814-244-0496. And that's a cell phone. You could send, I'd be happy to do whatever we need to do to get my address and go from there. Send me a check and go from there. So, yes.
The Ship Hotel, that's no longer there.
It burnt, it burned.
You know what year?
I do know. It burned. It burnt in the chalet restaurant, which was on top of the summit, burned the same year and at about the same time.
Not important, I just.
Oh, I got it written down here. Somewhere. But they had $2 million put aside to restore that. And the guy who owned it, I know him, he wanted 900,000 and they offered him 40,000 because the building was just dilapidated. Well, he thought he was gonna get more money out of it and, he ended up getting smoked. It's in here somewhere. I'll find it for you.
Okay, this is on the slide really well. So I'm gonna have Ray's email address here in the final slide. For everybody that's patiently waiting, I wasn't able to type that very easily. Let's get back in the Zoom, screen share mode here. Hang on a second. Here we go. Okay. And I will inject some information. Our next museum live event is currently scheduled for May the 11th, and it is from another special guest, Paul von Baines. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, who is a historian on the motor coach that is called the Greyhound Scenic Cruiser. We'll have more information and registration on how to sign up for that at aacamuseum.org. And don't forget, we also have a lot of new exciting exhibits coming up. Our professional vehicles, 100 years of service, Ollie's Bang for the Buck value vehicles, and Husqvarna motorcycle exhibit are all coming up here at the end of May. And if you like what you've seen and heard today, please support us by going to our website and clicking on Join Support up in the upper right-hand corner. And there's lots of information that you can get on there as far as our events, our programs, and how you can support the place.
If there's anybody that needs more information or would like to discuss another aspect of this or whatever, I'm always looking for information. Feel free to call me or text me and we can communicate. That's how this book came to be, you know, from car people. It's not about me, it's about all the car people that contributed towards it. So if you have something to talk about, certainly feel free to call me or get to my email and we'll talk.
We have autographed books available in the gift shop here at the AACA Museum. I would imagine that'd be a yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, we want to thank everybody for attending. Like always, we do have a YouTube channel. There's lots of stuff on it, including our past museum live events. And this one will be trimmed up, edited, and posted on there within the next week. If you have a friend that couldn't attend today, you'll be able to watch this entire event with Ray Wotkowski, who joined us today, in its entirety. You just find YouTube and either look up AACA Museum or America's Transportation Experience. You will find us. So with that, we're going to leave it there and thank Ray again. All who joined, and Vicente from Spain, you again get the Ironman Award because you are always the farthest, not traveled, but connected. So thank you, Vicente, for joining us. And everybody, happy motor and enjoy the rest of your weekend.